Well, everybody, thank you as we just get going here for joining. I'm Grant Hermes from Make It Make Sense. If you're a podcast listener, a Substack reader, subscriber, thank you so much for listening and subscribing. This is Mike Madrid, my go-to guy when we talk about Latino politics, great transformation. Mike, your Substack is a weekly, daily reading for me for politics. So
Well,
I
thanks.
appreciate you being here and talking today because we are talking about the strikes in Venezuela, what this means for Latin America, what it means for the Latin American diaspora around the country, and kind of this idea of the new old world order. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to call it that in
No,
the world. So,
yeah.
so as we get going here, like, where were you when you first heard about the strikes in Venezuela?
Boy, that's a great question. It happened, late night for me,
Mm,
which, during this time of the year, I usually am writing a lot and I'm kind of isolated like during the holiday season. Probably not the best of ideas, but the story broke at like 2 a.m. is when I started getting notices. And I was like, oh my, here we go. Like we all knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when and what the objective would be and how it would look. So yeah, I got in the middle of the night, and then of course that ruined my entire night because that shifted everything I was doing and ended up kind of following it through the course of the evening. And news was coming in pretty fast, obviously with the recordings and
hmm.
the decapitation event actually happened within an hour. They were in and out really quickly, and
Yeah,
militarily it was a success from a tactical standpoint. Then the questions immediately begin is like, what were we doing? What were the objectives? What are we trying to accomplish? And the real hard stuff starts now. As hard as that was, it's a different type of hard, but this is a big deal.
right. And like I mean, the legality stuff of this is
Yeah.
still up in the air. That's going to get worked through court in New York to see if some of
Yeah.
this stuff holds up.
Yeah.
I I mean, it rolled in for me at about 4:30, and so I was up for the rest of the morning and everything, and watching this come in. And the thing that struck me, I think at first, I don't know if this struck you too, was that we learned all of this stuff, and then Trump held his press conference almost 10 hours after the actual operation was carried out. But he held it from Mar-a-Lago, and this has been sort of a sticking point for me online that, like, for the first time where the United States has deposed a leader since like the 1990s, late 80s in the Western Hemisphere. We don't hear that from the president at the White House.
Yeah.
It's a very, like, from a political standpoint, from the stuff that you used to do, like, it's weird to have the president standing in front of drapes explaining this thing, right? I mean, geez.
Yeah. I mean, yes, there's no question that's true. I guess in the priority list of what has been debased in terms of the respect and sanctity of our democracy and norms, I mean, I'm glad you pointed it out because every one of these things needs to be pointed out. To be candid with you, I probably didn't even notice it that much
Sure.
because I'm just so used to it. Like if we were in the normal times, if we were in the before days, I think that would be probably one of the biggest parts of the story. Is like, why is the United States doing something of such consequence and not having the president and his leading advisors addressing this from the formality that this type of a moment requires? And the answer is because this is not a serious man. It's not a serious person.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even the not skiff that they watched this operation from, those images of them in the Mar-a-Lago ballroom, I think were maybe more stunning to me in a way. The curtains they had up were almost sheer, like you could see right through them. They're sitting in plastic chairs in a ballroom, like with open air. Like there's not even like there's a skiff in Mar-a-Lago, which I actually think there is, or something that is close to a skiff. For those of
I
you who are joining, it's a secure room, but like
Yeah.
this should have been done from the Situation Room. Why don't we have that image? And also this is a president who's all about image, and we don't have that image. He couldn't be bothered to take Marine One back to the White House to do this.
Well, that last point is, I don't think the real point. It's kind of like where his own mental framework is at. I mean,
Mm,
like, look, there's a lot of stuff bouncing around the internet right now, none of which I really subscribe to, which is the president's health is in imminent danger and he's failing. But I think what is undeniable is he's getting older and he's getting more frail, and his body is failing him, as
mm,
happens when you become 80. And I say that because I think he's increasingly. We know that he's reduced his schedule dramatically.
yep.
We know that physically, we're seeing the physicality of him slowing. I think that there's an attempt to kind of masculinize or muscularize his persona to the extent that he can. I think he sees the value in being militarily strong as he's growing physically weak. I don't want to analyze this, but this is not a president who's as concerned as much about the day-to-day optics as he normally has been. I mean, that has been, to your point, a very defining feature of Trumpism is managing the gold-plated brand.
Hmm.
And those things that you're pointing out are obvious miscues of a guy who's seeking comfort and relaxation and but still trying to demonstrate the veneer of strength militarily. And
Yeah.
I think those are both very closely correlated, by the way. I think they're connected.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, I think a man of and again, I'm not an expert, but a man of Donald Trump's temperament, I believe he is clinically a malignant narcissist. I think that's pretty evident. You don't need to be a professional to see that his inability to conjure up empathy, even in really sympathetic situations and even fake it, is a sign of a man who's so consumed by his own sense of space and persona and brand that when you literally can't beat Father Time and Mother Nature anymore, when your body is literally falling apart, whether it's swollen ankles or whether it's, your the face around your skin, or it's your walk and your gait, or it's your hands showing
Hmm.
the bruising of clearly intravenous therapies. Um, the president, I'm not gonna say he's not okay, but he's an old man. He's
Yeah.
an old man. He's a feeble man, and for somebody who has never aged gracefully, the only way I think especially when you're in the public eye the way that he is, the only way to kind of, I think, compensate for that is through show of force. Like, I've still got it. I still have some virility in me. I'm still strong.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting that that's the driving, um, feature of what's happening right now, but I don't doubt for a moment that it's a part of it. I mean,
Well,
I think it's gotta be part of the feature of what's going on.
I mean, and I talk about this in the podcast episode today, that there is a certain element of this thing in Venezuela and this new foreign policy they want to do right now specifically, but for sure the strike in Venezuela. That is sort of a wag the dog thing here that, his poll numbers were bad. What was coming out most recently from the Epstein files was worse. Even if they're just allegations, the allegations were worse than anything could imagine was being alleged in these things. And so he was in a really weak spot. And so then he does this thing in South America and then he starts threatening 6 other countries with bombings or invasions or being taken care of or whatever you want to call it. And it's projecting a certain amount of strength for him that
Right.
he was not getting. Not that these strikes in Venezuela have been popular. I don't know if you saw the Washington Post poll that was out last night or today, but like only 40% of Americans support what we did in Venezuela. A majority of Republicans said that they don't want the U.S. to handle the new government and run Venezuela. 66% of people, 63% of people said that they wanted the president to get congressional approval to do what he already did and do what he's likely going to continue to do. So
Right.
he's not in a strong spot here either,
No. Right.
uh, which I think is really, really interesting. And I think, too, from a politics standpoint, from a campaign standpoint, this is a president who ran on both being strong at home, but also America first. And in no way was this thing an America first move. It's not how they're trying to frame it as that in a certain way. But I don't think that that's what anybody thought this was going to mean at all. And so
No.
and that this might be a good segue into the thing that I really want to talk to you about too, is that if there's an amount of buyer's remorse that we had been seeing among the Latino community in different communities, different diaspora, whether it's Venezuelan, whether it's the Dominican or Haitian or Cuban, about immigration tactics domestically. And now we get this. And yes, we saw Venezuelan Americans and Venezuelan exiles in Miami and Doral and all across the country celebrating Maduro's deposition, which I I should say here that like nobody in their right mind is shedding tears over the fact that Maduro isn't in charge anymore. This is a bad guy, treated people terribly. Um, but what what is the sense of the fallout that you're getting from the Latino communities across the country here. And before I go on, if you're just joining here, we are talking all about Venezuela here. But if you're in the chat, leave questions and comments. We'll answer them as we go. Hit like on and the little heart button there. Send those in. It really helps boost this chat across Substack. But anyway, go ahead, Mike.
So, I mean, look, there's a lot of points to explore there. So let's start to tackle them. As it relates to the Latino vote, I do feel like I'm kind of on this. Been talking with reporters and other folks shows all day today, trying to put in perspective what this means from a domestic Latino vote
Yeah.
perspective. The Venezuelan diaspora, the Venezuelan vote, is 1% of the Latino vote. It's
Right.
one.
Right.
And it's almost all, obviously there are exceptions, but almost all of that 1% is in Florida, and not just in Florida, but in South Florida.
Mhm.
And so, clearly there are parts of the diaspora in New York City and Los Angeles. And remember that Venezuelans, there's a lot of Venezuelan commentary right now about, some of the longer term emigres that have been here. I think it's really fascinating to watch some of these spokespersons that are like, you know, PhD candidates at Princeton who will come out and talk about the horrible part of the Maduro regime, and there is no question the Maduro regime is a horrible regime. I'm not
Mhm.
going to defend that for a second, but if you're a PhD candidate from Venezuela, you're not representative of the typical Venezuelan.
Right.
So right, so it's not that unlike what was happening with the Cuban diaspora after the Castro regime. Right, these were bad, unsavory characters. Castro was not a good guy. Maduro's not a good guy. Hugo Chavez, these were not good people.
Mhm.
But the people that leave have a very biased perspective, and I'm not making a judgment on that perspective. It's a very understandable one, but they're very moneyed, they're very resourced, they're very educated, and they just lost all of their stuff because they were on the wrong side of the politics. So
Right.
so let's be clear about that, and just clear-minded, and I don't think that there's much disagreement on that. There are clearly a lot of emigres that have come here from Venezuela escaping the regime, people who were
Mhm.
desperately poor. That is also true. These are incidentally, these are the people that were being targeted by Trump to send them
I
back
I was
over the
just gonna
course of the
say,
past year.
they just got rid of temporary protected status for a lot of
Yeah,
these Venezuelans. Like,
yeah,
these are the
right.
same people that they were trying to deport back to this regime.
Precisely. So, like, these are, the people are being treated like chattel, like, a political football. There's no love for these folks in the Trump administration at all. This is a pure macro geopolitical chessboard that's going on.
Mhm.
And so what does that mean, right? Well, what that means is, and it's also very important to understand that you're going to see an early bump. A rally around the flag effect
Yeah.
is what we call it. It's much more diminished than it used to be. Like, if you look at what happened to Manuel Noriega in Panama in the '80s, late '80s, like George Herbert Walker Bush goes in, we remove a strong man that we've been supporting for a gazillion years and decide, okay, politically we need to make a change. So let's go send in the military and extract him. You saw 45, 47% spikes in support. The American public
Sure.
rally around the president. You're seeing a 10, 11, 12, 15-point spike in some of these polls, which is nothing. I mean, it's nothing compared to what it used to be. And it's also going to be shorter lived. Of that, I'm pretty
Mhm.
certain. We'll see what happens when it unfolds. But remember, this is the high point of what's going to happen. Like, now the hard part starts.
Right.
They've decided to keep the current regime in place. They're trying to convince private oil companies, Exxon primarily, to go in and invest $100 billion
Right. Right.
in capital to rebuild antiquated infrastructure in this incredibly chaotic, unstable environment, even by Venezuelan standards.
Right. $100
Like,
billion over the next decade, by
over
the way,
10 years.
which
Yeah,
means that,
exactly.
and we can't trust the Venezuelan military because they're part of the Maduro regime. They're part of the Chavistas, right? So that would then mean that we have to send American troops to
Exactly. That
protect
means,
the
yeah,
pipelines, the refineries, the drilling sites, the ports where this stuff gets shipped out, or the reserves where they're held. Like, that's on us then for the next decade. We just got out of an
that's
of a oil war, let's essentially.
Yeah,
Like,
that's exactly right. So that's the question before us now is like, you either do it with boots on the ground, to your point, or you have to do it with an extraordinary amount of cash buying off politicians and people and cartels to prevent that violence or protection money, or in the most likely scenario, both.
Right.
None of which turns out well. None of this turns out well. So, like, the likelihood of this turning into a quagmire is exceptionally high. Like, that is the most likely scenario. Could be wrong about that. Could end up being a nothing burger, but even if it's a nothing burger, this is not top of mind to change the political fortunes of the president of the United States in the near term with either the American public generally or Latino voters specifically.
Right.
And the downside is far, far greater than the upside. What I do believe, and this might be part of, I think, the discussion you wanted to have, which is it really is sort of the opening act in this Donroe
Yeah.
doctrine, this regionalization of American power, is we're no longer the global hegemon. I think this act kind of formalizes that. We saw Putin invade Ukraine and are basically like trying to play it all ways when we could have ended the war just by arming them with under either the Biden administration, Trump 1 or Trump 2 administration.
Right.
We could have driven or at least drawn the line at Crimea with the Russians. We decided not to do that. And there's got to be some discussion about what becomes the strategic implication. Like, what are we doing here? If
Yeah.
that's not the effort, if that's not the goal. And the clearly, especially with the president, who's finally being honest, by the way. I mean, give the guy credit with the pipe and drape at Mar-a-Lago. What a hell of a time for Donald Trump to be honest, right? Which is, it's about the oil.
Yeah.
Like, he's not even saying it's about establishing a free democracy in a region with instability, and we're here to liberate people's souls and bring them into the American table and blah, 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 all the bullshit that we've always at least said for
Right.
political purposes. He's like, no, it's about the oil. We want their
Yeah.
stuff. We're
It's
here to
just
take
about
their
their
oil.
stuff.
Yeah, we just want their stuff, which, by the way, we should explore this a little bit. That's the story of Latin America since our own independence.
Yeah.
From the Mexican-American War to the Spanish-American War to, Central American incursion and the United Fruit Company, all the way down to us, supporting strongmen in these situations that served our interest in Latin America, to Panama, Noriega. Like,
Right.
every part of Latin America has felt the arm of the Americans going down and screwing with their political situation for our benefit, by the way. We weren't doing it for the good of, the universal truths of Jeffersonian principles that we declared in the, Statement of Independence. Like, that's not what this is about. It's about money. This is
Right.
about power. This
Right.
is about
Well,
raw power. And like I was saying, Trump, I guess to his credit, has reverted us back to a pre-1918 era, a pre-World War I model that basically says the opposite of what Lincoln espoused, which, Lincoln was saying, right is what makes our values is what makes us strong. Trump is saying the exact opposite, which is military power is what makes America strong. We don't have values. We don't really believe in values other than power and military and monetary might.
right.
That's the era that Trump is trying to, and quite successfully at this moment in time, moving us down this road.
Yeah. The idea that Latin America, Central America, South America has been this political football for larger superpowers since, I mean, since it was discovered by like the European West,
Yeah.
uh, is the story of this part of the world because it's in the middle of everywhere and on the way to everything. And so I like,
And it's incredibly resource rich.
yes. And I was going to say too, that like, it is because like Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. It has like 1/5 of the gold reserves, I think, as well. Like
Yeah.
and a bunch of other things. That's all of South America. That's all of Central America.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what you think that means for the Latino and diaspora community in the US, that yet another version of this thing is happening in which like their ancestral homes, their family homes, sometimes these people who are fleeing or refugees to the US, their actual homes are still there in
Yeah.
those countries. And now again, they're this political football for the United States specifically to beat its chest. What is that going to do? Does that end up souring people on this presidency in a way that it didn't before because they were still thinking about the economy?
So, it's a great question, and again, before I answer it, because the short answer is we don't exactly
Right.
know, but let me try to set the guardrails and the contours for within which this very consequential discussion should be happening. First is the vast, vast majority of Latinos, I shouldn't say that, a significant majority of Latinos are of Mexican American descent.
Right.
60% of all Latinos are in the Southwest and are of Mexican American descent. That's where the history is. That is relevant because Trump is talking about bombing Mexico.
Hmm.
Um, the next largest group are Puerto Ricans, who are Americans by birth, of
Yep.
course, at 9%, then Cubans at 6%, which is going to be important because we're already posturing that Cuba's next. We're coming for Cuba next.
Yeah.
Then every other group, like most South American groups, are between 1 and 3% or less. And so I don't wanna I'm not dismissing it at all, but I do want to put in context that the affinity of, for example, a second or third generation Mexican American in the Southwest is completely different than a Colombian immigrant in South Florida.
Right.
The connection between those 2 is like basically making the connection between a recent immigrant from Serbia and a third generation Irish immigrant on
Right.
opposite sides of the country. They're the same general region, but ethnically, generationally, assimilatively, they're not there's no commonality on those values.
Right. As
So
with all issues when we talk about Latino voters, it's not really correct to talk about them as a monolithic group of voters because
correct,
it's so diverse. It's such a diverse group of
correct.
people. Yes.
So there is a natural reason and understanding why we want to say, well, if it's happening in Latin America, it's gonna affect Latino voters. But and yes, it is, but it's not happening in the way that conventional wisdom would suggest that it is. The way that it's happening is really much more reflective of what's happening with broader American sentiment. You may see, for example, support for Trump go up marginally higher with Latinos on the Venezuelan strike, but you're not seeing it move like in a different direction or against it when the rest of the public is moving in one direction. And it's not just on this issue, by the way, that's on basically all issues,
Right.
whether it's immigration or the economy. You're not seeing Latino voters move in a different direction than the general public. The what we're really looking for when we're gauging sentiment with Latino voters is it more than non-Hispanics or is it less than non-Hispanics?
Mhm.
I've never seen an issue where it's moved diametrically in the opposite position of the broader American public. So I say that in large part because this issue is highly unlikely with these incursions on Latin American governments to be a primary driver of voting behavior. Again, more context. Even coming out of 2025, where ICE raids and crackdowns and families being broken apart and terrorizing communities and militarization of neighborhoods was a defining feature of the year.
Mhm.
By a wide margin, that was not the top issue amongst for Latinos. By
Right.
a wide margin, it's the economy and cost of living issues that are still of paramount importance to this nebulous Latino vote. So, again, I understand the question, it's an important
Yeah.
one, but perspective is sort of everything here, right?
Mhm.
The question, the way Latinos will react to it, I think, will be much like everybody else, which is, "What the hell are we doing as a country here?"
Yeah.
Like, what is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? Why are we being so belligerent to our neighbors? Why have we violated what has become over a century's worth of foreign policy, which is respecting sovereignty, regardless of the size or power or even the corruption of a foreign government?
Right.
It's now as Trump again, and the one time I think he was brutally honest is saying it's about their oil, it's about their stuff. These guys have rare earth minerals. They've got huge gold deposits. They've got massive silver, zinc, and copper, and of
Right.
course, 20% of the world's oil reserves. Let alone you know fisheries and agriculture. It's incredibly resource rich, as is most of Latin America.
Right.
And so when we're gearing up for this conflict and we're devolving into a multilateral confrontation between Russia and China and the BRICS nations, this is an effort to bolster the hard mineral resources of a country that is I don't want to say stealing for war in the kinetic sense, but stealing for war in the economic sense, which is we still need energy. We still want cheap energy. We still want the silver industrial capacity to make iPhones and Teslas
Mhm.
and drive the technology of this digital age. You like silver, people keep talking about gold. Gold doesn't have much industrial value. Look at the price of silver.
Right.
Like that's what's really exploding. And so, yeah, I think in many ways this is kind of a reorientation, at least in the Trump world view, of how politics is going to be played in the digital age when war is not necessarily going to be kinetic, but it's very real about
Mhm.
dominance of AI and digital infrastructure, currency wars, and commodity wars, and also our own devolution into a multipolar world away from being a global hegemon. America's not the sole superpower anymore.
Right.
That's what this signifies. This is not the behavior of a sole superpower.
Right. It was interesting. I don't know if you saw Stephen Miller on CNN yesterday. I think basically like kind of lost his mind a little bit about the
Which
United
is a big
States.
tell.
Yeah, big tell, big tell. I mean, like it was like the U.S. is a superpower. We're going to act like a superpower. We're not going to let this happen in our backyard, even though like that's kind of not how we think about the hemispheres anymore. Even to think about the
Correct.
world in dividing it into hemispheres is a very, at the very least, Cold War sort of view of this thing, which is when you read things about how the president talks about things, that's kind of where his brain is stuck in the middle of the Cold War. It's why he thinks about manufacturing the way he does, is why he thinks about terrorists in the economy the way he thinks about them. But like, it is a very Cold War way to approach the world, which I
Or
guess,
earlier. Or
yeah,
earlier.
but yeah, definitely or earlier. And it's a real breaking of the Pax Americana, I think, that like,
Yeah.
it, which also then implies this thing too, that we didn't do diplomacy like this for the last 70 years because of nukes, because we don't have to operate the way that we did pre World War II. And now these kinds of invasions, attacks, strikes, whatever you want to call what we're doing and what Trump is threatening these other countries with, it would seem to me that that's inviting a kind of escalation that could invite something that could be done from halfway across the globe. It's war doesn't work that way anymore. So
Correct.
this kind of diplomacy feels outdated because it feels like we're leaving a door pretty wide open.
We're not leaving it open. We're kicking it down.
Yeah, we're,
See,
we're opening it, right?
yeah, we're opening it. See, look, we have to remember Truman's got some big decisions to make after the fall of the Third Reich. And there's this understanding, there's this realization that the disrespect for sovereignty as a part of international order, the establishment of the United Nations, right, is required to say at its core, whether you're militarily strong or economically strong or weak, we will respect each other's sovereignty.
Mhm.
You can't just go like Hitler did and roll into Poland and roll into the Baltics in the same way you couldn't in World War One. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire couldn't just be piecemeal torn apart
Right.
and like that was part of what happened. That's what created all these alliances and a global conflict. If you don't respect each other's sovereignty as they stand, and you use military might to depose or decapitate a leader, no matter how much you disagree, no matter
Mhm.
how corrupt, unless you are being threatened, your own sovereignty is being threatened, you can't do that. It's why we went into Kuwait to push Iraq out in the early 1990s. You
Right.
can't just go take their stuff, dude. Like, you can't
Right.
do that. We'll go into the small country of Kuwait, and people say maybe it was about oil, whatever. It was also about sovereignty. You can't just invade because you want their stuff.
Right.
So we with a global coalition push Saddam Hussein out. Like that is a sacrosanct part of the geopolitical order that has prevented the second part of Truman's consideration, which is it's not just tanks and machine guns anymore.
Yeah.
It's nuclear weapons.
Right.
And when you have countries that don't respect each other's sovereignty, and that goes back to reverts to the rule of law and the global order, the likelihood of a tactical nuclear strike grows pretty significantly.
Yeah.
Look, as somebody who was in Ukraine 90 days after the Russian incursion into the Donbass, on May Day, all the rumors that were beginning was Putin's going to drop a small regional tactical nuke on Kyiv, city I
Right.
was in. Like, that's a real threat.
Right.
And in this order, in this new world order where Putin can roll on Ukraine and we don't go in there to stop it, we go into Venezuela, nobody says anything. China starts looking at Taiwan and it's kind of like, yeah, that's a fair trade. Everybody got what they wanted. You get Venezuela, you get Ukraine, you get Taiwan. Nobody says anything. And we create a trilateral world, a three
Mhm.
pronged look at the world. Maybe that's the new global order. But what that also says is, what if Putin hit Ukraine with a tactical nuclear strike? The war would be over. Are we going to do something about it?
Right.
Is
What happens
NATO going to
then?
do something about it? Probably not now, right? What we're saying is,
Right.
what are we going to hold you to a different standard than what we're doing?
Yeah.
And that's the dangers. The increasing likelihood of nuclear proliferation starts to get considerably greater. And we don't have any history of whether that ends bad, but I don't want to take that back.
I've seen war games. I don't think it ends well. Like
Yeah,
I don't,
right,
yeah.
right,
We've all
right,
seen Terminator 2. Like, yeah. Like I also think you said something interesting in making connection or the contrast between Venezuela and Kuwait, which it's not just the like the moral sovereignty reasons. Yes, oil in Kuwait. Yes, oil in Iraq. Desert Storm 1 and 2. But like also the democracy sovereignty thing of it. But it's that was done with a global coalition. And
right.
and yeah, NATO is probably not going to help us out in South America if that was why we're going into Venezuela, if that's the pretense that we're using and Trump doesn't say it's for the oil. But, you get Canada, you get I'm not I mean he's friends with Argentina, but like whatever, right? Like you get a coalition of people to do this thing and then you get a little bit more backing and maybe it seems a little less like what it is, but we just didn't do any
We
of
don't
that
care.
either.
Well,
So
brother, I don't know if Canada would be with us.
I don't think I don't think they would. I'm just saying
Right.
like, in a
You
world
mean our
like
closest allies that are going to de facto be there. But that's kind of the point, is when we start behaving like this, we don't have any of those anymore.
right,
Like Denmark doesn't trust us because they're looking at what we did and going, what's going to stop us from taking Greenland?
right,
Nothing.
right,
Nothing. The Russians aren't going to stop us. The Chinese aren't going to stop us. NATO's not going to go to war with us.
right,
They can't. NATO can't take on the US on its western flank and Russia incurring into Ukraine and taking on the right flank. Like, it's not going to
right,
happen. Like, Europe's stuck.
right,
And so this world is reordering. And what we are saying, the real danger is, even we're not even holding up the pretense that we're fighting for American values or the American idea, because we don't believe in it anymore. Not just the president of the United States. I would submit and argue, we elected this guy again.
yeah,
We
yeah,
we knew who he was. Like, one of the reasons why we are so viewed so dangerously in the world is not just because of Donald Trump. It's that people don't trust the American electorate anymore. We put him back in.
right,
Like, we're saying this is what we want. So get rid of Donald Trump. What are the Americans going to do next? We don't have a good answer for that,
right,
because who the hell knows what we're going to do?
right.
So, so,
I mean,
yeah, to your point, yes, normally, and by the way, the other underlying element of this, there's not even a weak argument for Venezuela, for what we did in Venezuela being in our national interest.
yeah,
What we tried to do is conjure up this narrative about drugs,
yeah,
which is absurd. But that's became the rubric, the fake argument to say, see, it's in our national interest. We have to go in and stop, as Stephen Miller would say, the rapists and the drug dealers coming from Venezuela.
right.
Like, what are you
Like
talking about,
did you
right?
read the indictment of Maduro? The
No.
I went through it and neither oil nor fentanyl are mentioned once in the entire indictment. And they tried to do this sort of bait and switch thing where they were talking a lot about fentanyl. And Trump likes to throw up this stat that each alleged drug boat is going to kill 25,000 Americans, which like mathematically doesn't work out when you look at how many people actually overdose every year from all drugs, not just opioids. But then they tried this bait and switch where it was like, it's not fentanyl, it's cocaine. And that's what's in the indictment. But also, we just pardoned JOH, right, from Honduras. And so, like, that doesn't make any sense because that guy was moving a lot more coke than anybody in Venezuela has been accused of doing. And so it's not the drugs. And so now, and also I think too, in the conversation we are just having about not having an international coalition and support for this thing, in which maybe you make this case that Maduro is a part of a cartel, which might not be a cartel of, cartel of the sun or whatever, like, which is just a slang term, but whatever. Like, and you bring that to The Hague. That's an international crime then at that point, right?
Right.
You bring that to there and make this an international case, not New York. You also charge him in New York, but you deal with The Hague first to give you some moral cover. I don't know why I'm trying to game this out for an administration that doesn't clearly want this and has no interest in doing this. It just feels to me that in a normal world, that would be how you approach this thing, not what
Yeah,
we're
but
doing now.
I think that's right. But the message here is we're not in a normal
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
and I would not overthink the intentions any more um than they're doing what they're doing for just pure raw power. I
Mm.
mean, look what they've got you doing. They're looking for you to trying to find a rationale for their behavior.
Right. Right. Right.
Like,
Right.
like they're not even concerned about it. Like, I don't even care enough to create a rationale. This is what we're doing. He said it, man.
Yeah.
Like, we're going in because we want their stuff. That's why we're going in. And that's what he said about Greenland in the past.
Hmm.
Like, we want their stuff. There's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff under that tundra. That's what
Yeah.
we want. He's not like, this will protect the security architecture of the, free world.
Right.
None of that. He's like, no, they got a lot of stuff and we need it and we're going to take it.
Yeah.
So that's, like I said, that is American foreign policy. The Don Roe doctrine is, we will take what we want whenever we want it. And this not just destabilizes, it eviscerates the architecture of not just world peace and stability, but the prevention of nuclear annihilation.
Yeah.
Because that in many ways, the respect of sovereignty is what has in large part kept the five nuclear powers from doing what we and Russia just have done in the past 5
Right.
years. I mean, Russia is doing it too.
Right. It is that thing that is also what, the end of World War II is built on. It's what the UN is built on, and the UN Charter is built on. The Geneva Conventions are built on this idea about sovereignty. And it has led to the most peaceful time in human history. Like,
Yeah.
apart from all the wars that the United States has been a part of, the conflicts we've been a part of, in the grand scheme of things, it has been the most peaceful time to be a human on the planet.
It's
And
worked.
and it's worked. And the thing that I think is interesting too is that when people talk about the Monroe Doctrine and now the Don Roe Doctrine, which I can't believe we're gonna have to call it that, it's this idea that we moved away from this because it was incredibly isolating. Because we had no choice but to return to a global facing country in late World War I, but then really in World War II. Pearl Harbor ends the Monroe Doctrine effectively because we have to. I know it doesn't quite end there, but
Yeah.
like the tipping point, I think, is when you start to slide away from it is Pearl Harbor. And by that point, we'd been a pretty isolated country, really. Certainly through between 1823, when the Monroe Doctrine gets signed, and World War I, the Civil War notwithstanding. So, what this new thing does is pulls us away from the world. We shrink from the world stage despite trying to do all these land grabs in a way that we shrink from it in a world that is fully interconnected and fully knit together at this point in a way that it wasn't the last time we tried this. And so I'm waiting to see what the consequences of that thing are, which we're not going to know for a long time, but it's interesting and something worth paying attention to.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see it that way.
Hmm.
Let me explain why. I mean, you may be right. We don't know. What we do know is we're entering a new era,
Yeah.
right? But what I will say is, let's understand something about the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, 1823, it's a statement, is what
Yeah.
it is. It's a declaration. And the real fascinating thing about the Monroe Doctrine is the United States in 1823 had no business making this kind of a declaration.
Right.
We had nothing to back this up.
Right.
Okay, nothing. It was Monroe basically saying, I wrote a piece on this called "The Rise of Banana Republicanism." It's on my Substack. I just
Yeah.
put it on. I
It's great.
wrote a couple days ago, and but what it was, if you want to give it something, was it was aspirational. The Monroe Doctrine was basically saying nobody's going to mess with our sphere of influence. Well, again, we had nothing to back that up, but we're just like, in between these two big oceans, beating our chest and saying
Yeah.
we're this brave new nation. Don't mess with us. The one aspirational element of the Monroe Doctrine was basically saying, like, we're not going to allow monarchies and royal governments to come in anymore. This is going to be a place where republics and democracies can thrive and flourish.
Right.
And I'm being generous there with the Monroe Doctrine. But it also sort of gave us this kind of, we call it a doctrine, but again, when you're having to back up a doctrine, it's just it's not even the bully on the playground. It's the smart mouth kid running around circles around the
Yeah.
fat bully,
Yeah.
saying, picking on him because he can't catch him because the bully's not going to exert the energy to go after him. It's a great analogy, by the way. So the United States then goes through all of these iterations and in its own evolution. But we realize after the Second World War, like, we don't have a choice,
Yeah.
right? Because we do ultimately get sucked into World War I and World War II, despite our desperate attempts not to. As Winston Churchill said, you can count on the Americans to do the right thing only after every other option is exhausted. Right?
Right.
We enter both of these things late. We could have probably been more impactful. We're like, we don't care. Let Europe fight its old wars with its old baggage. We're not going to mess with that. And so, millions and millions of people perish because we don't engage. And so then we realize, okay, we're going to have to be involved in this. Communism takes over nearly 2/3 of the world within 30 years, freaks us out. We're like, we've been
Hmm.
around 200 years. We're only a third of the world. 30 years, communism is just growing, and we're like, we got to contain. Containment becomes part of it, which means we've got to start meddling in other people's affairs.
Right.
Otherwise, the war is going to come home. So, America First has always been a kind of a 30,000 foot level, easy brand to believe in. Is, let's just focus on our own part of the world. But ever since we've had the reach and capacity to mess with other people's stuff, we've been at the forefront of the world of
Sure.
doing it. And not only that, but the Monroe Doctrine itself is basically saying, if we could mess with other people's stuff, we would,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
And now, with Trump in this latest iteration, is basically saying, you can call it America First and he campaigned on it, but does anybody believe anything he was actually campaigning on? You're a real sucker, and maybe MAGA was, but I believe that, and again, I write this in the piece, MAGA is about believing Donald Trump is America.
Yes.
And so whatever Trump says is wherever you're going to go.
Right.
So it's not ideological. It's not values based. It's not on a philosophy of government. It's whatever the dear leader tells us to do, we'll do, because as long as he's winning, America's winning. So if he's saying the Epstein files are bad and we should release them, then we'll go crazy and say that's what should be done. Once he pivots on it because he's in it, we'll pivot because we've got to protect the dear leader.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing holding these people to an entrenched sense of their own self or values. He is their values.
Right.
And so when he starts saying, I want all of it, this is our gambit to recognize that a values based system that America led has failed because we're the only people being the good guys. Everybody else is a bad actor, including Canada and France and all these people taking advantage of us on all of these tariffs and these, trade imbalances. We're the only ones playing by the rules. No one else is. That shit ends today. That's Trumpism 2.0. That's the
Right.
second term of Trump. That's
Right.
what he comes in and says. So when he's saying America First, I think a lot of people are saying he's an isolationist and doesn't want wars. He may have said that himself. What he's really saying is America First means taking little guy's stuff to make us stronger. In fact, that's what he said about Greenland.
Yeah.
He's saying Denmark needs us to take Greenland
Right.
because they can't protect it. We can. I mean,
Right.
this is an incredibly different worldview
Yes.
than we have had since, I mean, arguably aspirationally the Monroe Doctrine, but James Monroe didn't have nukes. He didn't have a navy. He didn't have a standing army. He didn't have the reserve currency of the world.
Right.
He was just trying to make this declaratory, lofty statement about what this new hemisphere meant. Trump is like, no, we want their gas. We want their
Mhm.
silver. We want
Right.
their ore. We want all of it.
Right. And then like, yeah, then I guess we'll talk about security, and then we'll talk about defending the Arctic or whatever. If it's Greenland or defending the pass between the Pacific and the Atlantic or South America or whatever, then that's all secondary. It is going to be a wild time to watch this stuff.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you'll notice he never made a declaratory statement about how great this is going to be for the Venezuelans.
Oh, it has nothing to do with that. Marco Rubio has been trying to do that because this thing in Marco Rubio's history and personal life, because of where his family came from, is sort of his like little bugaboo that he wants, his pet project that he kind of wants to work in here, and it just seems to align with Trump's idea of being a prospector president and and doing this thing. And so yeah, but Trump's not saying any of that at all.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that Trump has never said that the American right, and I think probably all of us as Americans haven't really called out. I mean, Donald Trump has never spoken, never once given a speech on the virtues of smaller government,
No.
which is central to conservatism, or at least what conservatism was, because he doesn't believe in it. Like he
Right.
believes in a strong government if it gets him what he wants. Like
Right.
he'll triple the size of ICE. He'll go intervene in Venezuelan affairs if he can pick stuff up. I mean, I
He'll
think
make
that
the US government buy actual stakes in
companies,
companies.
private companies, yeah.
Yes. Which
I mean,
which like
it's
I
socialism. Like,
it is socialism. It is.
yeah, because he's trying in his Cold War or pre-Cold War perspective, raw power is all that matters.
Yeah.
This is a man who's been consumed by being rich. The richer you are, the more valuable you are. The
Mhm.
whole point of being alive is being rich and powerful in his worldview.
Yeah.
Like, that's just who Donald Trump is. And that's what, when he says, we're going to make America great again, we're going to make everybody rich and powerful. And if not you individually, you'll be a part of the richest and most powerful country, meaning you'll be the safest because we can beat everybody up on the block. But what that
Right.
requires is we got to beat up everybody on the block.
Right. Or have enough money to pay him off, which also feels dirty to a lot of Americans because it is dirty business.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to ask you, Mike, before I we sign off here is what happens to the broader voting electorate? I mean, you're a polling guy. When we are in several conflicts or occupying territories like Greenland, let's say we do that. Let's say we make an incursion into Mexico in some way. We're in Venezuela. We're in Colombia, or Cuba collapses, or we force that to happen, or whatever. And like we're spread thin. We're spending a bunch of money on this stuff. Oil and gas aren't actually getting cheaper because that's likely not going to happen if we take the Venezuelan oil. Because why would oil companies devalue their own oil? Uh, and like these things, the life for Americans isn't actually getting better in the day to day. What does that end up doing to polling here? Or are there more Americans, do you think, that are satisfied with the idea of being the big guy on the block? And that's good enough.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
you're already seeing it in polling. I mean, I think you brought up earlier in the discussion is this is not popular.
Hmm.
There is a rally around the flag effect, but you were seeing polling 75-25. People didn't want to do this. They
Right.
didn't want to do this. And look, even the cost of living stuff, the price of gas, if we broke it down to that elementary level, we're not going to see those price decreases for a decade. I mean, the amount of money that needs to be invested,
Yeah.
like Exxon's not going to eat $100 billion for the good of America.
Right.
And even then, it's going to take years to get that stuff online in a way that will measurably impact the global economy. So look, let me give the greatest benefit of the doubt to the Trump administration, just to war game this out. Let's say a bunch of some of the most brilliant people in the government meet in the Situation Room and say, you know what? we're losing our hegemonic power as a country. What we need to do is very quickly scramble to gather as many pieces and control as much of the world's mineral, oil, energy, silver, gold, rare earth materials as possible to be competitive as we see a rising China and an aggressive Russia.
Hmm.
The likely scenario is we've got this three-legged stool of global power now, different than the Cold War, but it's not completely multilateral. But we're no longer calling all the shots. The rise of BRICS is challenging our currency. AI could change everything. The best strategy is to go out and grab as much land as we can, which is as rich as we possibly can. Like that's the best. I hate to say it, but that's like the best case for a rational, though immoral, foreign policy. I don't believe that that's what's happening. Like
Yeah.
maybe it is, but I mean that's the best case. The more likely scenario, which is they're just kind of belligerent cowboys saying, let's just go take this stuff because we can get it and it's going to enrich me and my buddies and our friends. And oh, by the way, it also benefits us as a country because once we take their stuff, we'll be stronger to take the next little guy's stuff.
Right.
Like that's what we're hearing about Cuba, Colombia. Like if you want to go after part of the tell on the cocaine stuff is like, that's not Venezuela, that's Colombia, which he's
Right.
already said Colombia's next too.
Right.
Mexico, you're next. Cuba, you're next. Colombia, you're next. Like we're taking the whole damn thing. That's not good foreign policy.
Right.
Like that's the aspirations of 1930s Germany, right?
It is.
That's what the country that believes we're going to just take everything.
Right.
That's what that mentality is. And I'm not making a comparison to the personalities of Hitler. I'm making a personalities to a nation and a people who are not as strong as they think they are, and so are easily bought into the idea that they can restore their former greatness if they just conquer everybody.
Right. And I think case in point too, I think this is a good place to end. But and I want you to talk about the stuff you're working on too. I want you to log a little bit here, but I think we saw that this administration hasn't thought anything beyond we just want their stuff and the next guy's stuff
No, yeah.
because at that press conference, nobody who spoke had any plan or any explanation for how this was going to work. We didn't have a timetable for when elections might happen. Trump barely was like, I think these guys behind me are going to be running the country. Like that's Pete Hegseth's going to be running the country? What do you mean by that? Steve, you're going to give the keys to Venezuela to Steve Miller? What do you mean by that? And like
That's what,
any
yes.
any normal administration, which obviously this is not and never has been, but would have had a clear path forward for what the transition team was going to look like, who that was going to be. They likely would have brought somebody in from the outside in to be like, hey, this is our new envoy to Venezuela for this government. And we just didn't get any of that because they didn't care about any of it because it was always about give their stuff, taking their stuff.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Look, and you said there's no foreign policy framework. There's no rationale. There's no feel, even in a perfunctory sense, to create some rationale for what we're doing. Just 2 seconds ago, Wall Street Journal broke the story that Rubio just told a group of lawmakers that we're trying to buy Greenland. Okay, now look, Denmark's not going to sell us Greenland
Right.
unless they're really brought to heel. But this is the same rationale in the reverse of what we did with Venezuela with the drug dealers.
Right.
They're setting up a narrative to say we should have it, we should protect it. We are behaving the way that we have always drew a line against China on Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan's going to say we've got a legitimate claim to Taiwan. What are we going to say now? No, you don't?
Right.
Like we're doing everything that we're saying you should not be doing. We're doing what Russia essentially is doing to Ukraine.
Right.
So that's at some point, whether it was a conscious deal or whether it was or whether it's just unraveling or unfolding as a matter of fact, what we're seeing is the three major superpowers expand their reach regionally. Us probably from the Cape of Chile, Argentina up to Canada because he's saying he wants to invade Canada,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
this is all going to be the new America. The Chinese gets Taiwan back and maybe the South China Sea, and Russia gets what? Europe and Eurasia. And that's the new game of Risk. I mean, that sounds far fetched and kind of crazy, but tell me that there aren't a lot of indicators moving in that direction.
I mean, if it's a game of Risk, all the pieces are pointing in those directions, so it's not that outlandish to talk about it from a 30,000-foot view.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mike, tell the folks here before we go, what's coming out from you? What are you working on? What can we look forward to? What can I look forward to from reading from your stuff? Because like I said, I love it. So yeah.
I mean, the day to day, I do write about this stuff. Kind of, if you're interested in kind of the conversation that we've been having, this is the type of stuff that I write about, which is sort of everything is in complete flux. This is not about Donald Trump, although he's a key player in it, but the world is changing as we enter the digital age. The
Mhm.
name of my Substack is The Great Transformation. I write on technological change, political change, primarily political change, demographic change, economic change, and the interaction of all of those as we enter this new era of human history. So these are the types of topics that I explore with Grant. We've known each other for a little while now. He's a good friend. That's the best place to find me. You can find me on social media on X, although I'm not there much anymore. I've really cut back a little bit on Blue Sky, but I try to live on Substack as much because it's longer form. It allows me to think and articulate things in a longer form way than just a tweet. So join me
Yeah.
there if you're interested.
And in a world like this, we need more of that, I think. So, Mike,
Okay.
as always, man, thank you for coming on the show. It's a
Let's do
pleasure
it
to talk
again.
to you. We will do
Yeah.
this very soon, I'm sure.
All right, brother. Take
All
care.
right. Everybody
Happy
have
New
a
Year to
great
you.
day. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everybody else. Make sure you follow me here at Make It Make Sense with Grant Hermes. I got a brand new piece coming out tomorrow that I think tentatively is going to be called The Prospector President. We're going to go through all of the president's ways that he's wanted to mine and drill and pick his way through the world. And so it's going to be an interesting one for tomorrow. So make sure you subscribe for that tomorrow. Otherwise, I will talk to you guys all on Thursday. See you, Mike.
Bye bye now.